So we'll get started now, while we just wait for a few more people to join. Thank you for joining us this morning or evening, depending on where you are in the world, for this international speaker series with one of the 2 UN high-level champions for climate action, Gonzalo Munoz. I hope those of you joining us from Aotearoa in lockdown are keeping safe and well. Ko Charlie Keeling-Aho. I'm a senior advisor in the communications and engagement team at the Commission, and I'll shortly explain how we're going to run through the session today. But before I do that, I'm going to ask Bevan Hunter, a principal advisor in the Māori Corporate Services team, to lead us into this session with the karakia.
Ngā mihi nui kia koutou, I runga I te pāka whakata reo nei, a tēnā koutou katoa, he mihi rangatira kia koe a Gonzalo, anei he karakia. I te hui nei, whai a te mātauranga kia mārama, kia whai take ngā mahi katoa, tū maia, tū kaha, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. So for those of us who speak English, for this gathering, seek knowledge for understanding, have purpose in all that you do, stand tall, be strong, let us show respect for each other. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Bevan, thank you. So before we get started, and those of you who are familiar with these sessions will be used to this, it would be really great if you could please write your name and the organisation or community you represent in the chat box while I'm running through how the session is going to work, and let us know where you're joining from in the world. Since we can't see your faces, it's really good to know who we have listening into this session today. This is the 9th session now in our International Speaker Series, and we're very privileged to have our champion join us today alongside Commissioners Professor James Renwick and Professor Nicola Shadbolt, who will be leading this session for us today. James is a leading climate scientist with a strong national and international reputation and 4 decades of experience in weather and climate research. His appointment as a lead author and coordinating lead author on 3 assessment reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, demonstrates his expertise. Nicola is a farmer, forester, director and academic. As the appointed chairperson of Plant and Food Research and former director of Fonterra Cooperative Group in Transit New Zealand, Professor Shadbolt has a strong understanding of implementing sustainability in businesses and keen appreciation of how environmental management fits alongside social and economic imperatives. I'll shortly hand over to Nicola to introduce Gonzalo for us before we have a chance to hear from him directly. This will be followed by a short discussion between Gonzalo, Nicola and James before you have the chance to get your questions answered using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. You can use this space to type your questions throughout the session. We probably won't have time to cover all the questions in this session, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. And as always, if you'd like to speak to each other or share your thoughts, please feel free to use the chat. It's always really good to see your conversations, and it might be a good space to share any of your thoughts or helpful resources. I just want to let you know we are also recording this session, so anyone who is unable to make it can watch it on our website afterwards. That's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Nicola. Kia ora, everyone.
Right, thanks, Charlie. Well, a great pleasure in welcoming Mr. Gonzalo Munoz to our session. Gonzalo is a business entrepreneur and local and social change maker at the forefront of environmental innovation in Chile, who invented the country's recycling industry to usher in a future without waste. He did so by founding a recycling company in 2009, and ever since has been presiding over the expansion of the company to other parts of Latin America. His company produces a recycling station capable of recycling 90% of household solid waste. Through the popularity of his innovation, Muñoz has been leading a cultural movement to advance environmental sustainability and social inclusion. In recognition of his leadership, Gonzalo was awarded the Circular's 2019 International Prize at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos, and was also invited to join the new Plastics Economy Advisory Panel at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I'm pretty sure you'll be able to get further information about him from the website, but now I shall hand over to Gonzalo and look forward to his talk. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Nicola. It's a real pleasure to be with all of you today. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the land of the long white cloud, a country well known for its natural beauty and also its natural leadership position when it comes to environmental protection, something that is more and more important due to the days that we're living, but mostly due to the evidence the science is showing us. In the last weeks, we've received a really important report that I assume that we will be talking about it later. So please allow me to convey also apologies on behalf of my dear friend and colleague Nigel Topping, the incoming COP26 climate champion, who really wanted to join us, but he just returned late to the UK after a long overseas trip. We were also visiting some islands in the Caribbean sector, related, of course, to the impact of the climate crisis. He desperately needs to catch up on some sleep, so hoping that you will be able to have him in another session in the future. So friends, the international community is now racing to a net zero resilient world. But while we have seen significant change that is already underway, we all know and we acknowledge that the pace of the decarbonization that we require is definitely not yet where it needs to be. We must accelerate in all possible areas of the economy and society in order to deliver the climate resilient zero carbon world in time, but in line with science. That means no longer than 2050, and considering the complexity that this is, we need to deliver not only in terms of reaching the net zero world, but also building the resilience that is absolutely critical for so many regions and so many people around the world. So as current United Nations high-level champions, following last year's or 2 years ago, 2019 COP25, I am now working together with Nigel under the United Nations mandate from Paris that sits alongside but separate to the intergovernmental negotiations under the Secretariat there. It's called the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change. So those are two complementary parallel agendas. One is how do we negotiate and how do we progress and solve everything related to the negotiation. That's the role of the state members. And then this other agenda that's about climate action. What do we need to implement? And we recognize that those that have a very strong capacity of implementing are exactly what is called the non-state actors. Okay, so you have the state members and then the non-state actors. And in that sense, our role as high-level champion is to provide a platform, we call it like the bridge, to both recognize and accelerate climate action in what we call the real economy. Okay, so on one side, we have the negotiation body, the possibilities of the nations to reach agreements, and on the other side, we have all the non-state actors that have the capacity of implementing, but we need to bridge those two sectors of our society, that what's called the real economy and the negotiation. That bridge is exactly the agenda that we lead with Nigel. And the idea is, of course, that we can accelerate climate action efforts from businesses, investor community, cities, states in many countries. As you can recognize, the subnational states have a really important play, and of course, civil society at large, for all of them to reduce their carbon footprint, ensure more climate resilient infrastructure and societies, and definitely drive positive change by protecting and reconnecting with nature. All of that is something that, if done well, if shown well, then the member states can therefore identify that they are having the support coming from the non-state actors, and then hopefully will activate the ambition loop, whereas we will see then national governments implementing more bold public policies, and that will reinforce action and so on. So our overreaching campaigns to reach for these concrete efforts are called, on one side, Race to Zero, the other one is Race to Resilience, and then with Mark Carney, we launched GFANZ, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. So the main three topics of the climate agenda: mitigation, adaptation and resilience, and finance. And the momentum behind these three campaigns is building strongly now as we enter the final 2 months in the lead up to COP26. The COP in Glasgow over the first fortnight in November is the first 5-year test of the Paris Agreement, and it's called ratchet mechanism, a promise of countries to tighten their targets for 2030. So we are in a very special moment when we need to see, on one side, the parties, the state members, increasing their ambition, but how important it is to see how all of the rest of the society is supporting that. And in some cases, even increasing the ambition, activating this ambition loop. More generally, Glasgow represents a real important moment for the world to say enough is enough. It's time for us to change the course, and we trigger a momentous and decisive decade when humanity finally gets to grip with the enormous challenge posed by climate change. We need to deliver on the promise of Paris. And believe me, COVID is not only not an excuse, COVID has accelerated the climate agenda. Over the last year or so, we've really started to bend the curve towards achieving a crucial objective of the Paris Agreement, that is to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius at the end of the century, right? By driving actors outside government to commit to achieve the net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner. To get there, the science says that we basically need to have emissions by 2030. It's a big ask and a big task, but it's the only possible way ahead. So there's no question here whether we take that or another pathway. That's the only one that we have if we want to really not only fulfill on the objectives or the Paris Agreement, is if we are definitely understanding what science is telling us to do, that's exactly what we need to do. That's what I call the treatment for getting the cure of this disease called the climate crisis. And in the real economy, and through a race to zero, more than 70% of global carbon emissions are now covered by net zero commitments made both by national government, but also by businesses, investors, universities, and states and local governments. That's something that we can stop there, like say, wait, where were we 2-3 years ago? Maybe even a little more, or 3 years ago, the idea of reaching net zero was something to be achieved in the second half of the century. Then the IPCC 1.5 report and showed us, no, we have to do it a lot sooner. And in a very short period of time, we went from almost having zero commitments to net zero by 2050 to have now more than 70% of the global economy. That means a lot. Of course, it's not only about what we declare or what we commit for the next 30 years, is so much about what we do today. And underpinning our race to zero is a strong belief in what we call the ambition loop, as I said, that action from non-state actors creates more political space and acceptance, and indeed more space in terms of emissions reductions for national governments to feel more comfortable to bring forward more ambitious targets, or what are called the NDCs, the National Determined Contributions, as they are called in the Paris Agreement. One great example here is the success of the American We Are Still In campaign, that coalition of non-state actors which kept the flame of climate action alive in the US during the 4 years of the previous administration, and gave some real comfort to the incoming Biden-Harris administration that with new policies and efforts, that it could achieve a halving or more of the emissions by 2050 at the latest. So we can see how through coalitions that we are still in, what are called the Alliances for Climate Action, and believe me, we're replicating that in countries like Brazil, in Argentina, in Mexico, in Chile, in Australia, Japan, Vietnam, South Africa. In all of those countries, what we're willing to see is the capacity of the non-state actors to activate the ambition loop. In addition to the political significance of our work, we are also engaged in the details of what is required in each of the major sectors of the global economy to really keep the 1.5 centigrade temperature goal within reach. And more specifically, we are seeing an acceleration of effort and a transition towards a series of what we call the system breakthroughs, or the 2030 breakthroughs, that will put us on the right path by achieving the necessary scale, the cost reduction, and the rapid uptake and deployment of new technologies, mostly from now to 2030. So it's all about what do we need to achieve now, right? What do we need to do in order to peak emissions now, have the emissions by 2030, and then put us on track to net zero by 2050. So to take one example, where there is currently a lot of hype, especially across the Tasman Sea in Australia, about the role that hydrogen can play in decarbonizing the economy internationally. And in my country, we are approaching a consensus that green hydrogen is technically and economically ready to scale up. and approaching an inflection point of exponential growth in the green hydrogen economy. To make this tangible, we, as the climate champions, have proposed a breakthrough target of deploying 25 gigawatts of electrolysis related to renewable hydrogen by 2026, which we think would put us on an exponential trajectory to green hydrogen deployment consistent with the net zero before 2050. So saying it also like very simply, we think that if we achieve that 25 gigawatts of electrolysis by 2026, green hydrogen will become competitive to fossil fuels, and therefore the change will be absolutely unstoppable. We have proposed similar system breakthrough targets in other sectors as well, including for the end of the internal combustion engine or the promotion of electric vehicles, steel, cement, shipping, even net zero portfolios for banks, insurance, asset managers, asset initiatives. And indeed, in the finance corner, our efforts fall under this new umbrella campaign we launched just a few months ago with Mark Carney, called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, or GFANZ, as I mentioned, which now has net zero portfolio commitments from financial institutions, including investment banks, asset managers, and insurers, for managing more than $90 trillion under management. $90 trillion have now committed to help develop this path of the global economy towards net zero by 2050. I was recently pleased to learn that New Zealand companies and non-state actors are well aware of the race to zero and have begun to join up. For example, the city of Auckland has joined the race to zero and has a science-based target to reduce emissions by half by 2030 and a net zero target by 2050, just like science is telling us to do. But we have only a handful of smaller companies signed up. So it is important that Kiwi big businesses also come on board. We would be pleased to engage directly with leading industry bodies to build some momentum in the space, including the Climate Leaders Coalitions and of course, the Sustainable Business Council. Honestly, and I'm now speaking also as an entrepreneur, you business leaders from New Zealand cannot miss the opportunity that Glasgow represents. And saying it in the other way, not having a commitment today is also a declaration. You are saying something. And I cannot imagine somebody saying that this is not an important agenda. You need to make it center of your activity. You need to make it visible, not only for your shareholders, but you need to make it visible for your government, and of course, for the United Nations, for the system as a whole, to understand and measure very well what is happening and therefore progress positively. But all of these campaigns and initiatives for COP26 will come to nothing if not backed by true vision, leadership, and a conviction at the national level that climate action first movers will ultimately win the race. The world has taken a great interest in the clarity with which your Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has described climate change as the challenge of our generation. And her messages of solidarity for the island nations of the Pacific, for whom climate is the ultimate existential threat. We celebrate her leadership, and we expect that we can see that also reflected at the non-state actors level. We have noted, for example, the recent statement from the Pacific Island Forum leaders, joined by Australia and New Zealand, that they will never accept any reduction of their maritime jurisdiction that might result from future sea level rise and the resulting loss of coastlines and physical futures. This is an unprecedented political territory and an important reminder of how seriously climate will affect lives and livelihoods, particularly in the most vulnerable countries. It is also a reminder of the need for a real vision and leadership at a political level. It is a welcome sign from New Zealand that under your Net Zero Carbon Act, political decisions on targets and level of ambition are informed by an independent body with the resources to understand deeply the science and the economic aspects of climate policy, right down the sectorial level. Looking at the Commission's recent recommendation to government, there is a clear guide on overall levels of ambition, but some more work to be done on whether, and if so, how international offsets will contribute and whether the important agricultural sector will start to transition as well. I know that with our own Race to Zero campaign and the criteria for joining up, we have asked corporations not to rely on offsets and to do the emissions reductions work themselves. But perhaps more important than anything is that New Zealand works fast now to ambitiously update its 2030 NDC in the lead up to or at COP26, following significant updates from a number of other institutionalized economies over the last 12 months. A strong step forward will strengthen New Zealand's moral voice on the international stage at a time when it is badly needed. New Zealand might be small in pure geography terms, same thing like Chile, not amongst the major emitters, and seriously distant from Glasgow, same thing as Chile, but it has the opportunity to make a continent-sized contribution to a successful COP26. Thanks for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to questions and discussion with our participants. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much, Gonzalo. That was inspiring stuff, and great to hear the work you're doing. Yeah, I've got an awful lot of notes here and a lot of questions I'd like to ask. But I'm interested. You mentioned that there were not so many companies involved in New Zealand and not so many large ones here, and I just wondered internationally whether you could comment on the kinds of companies and organisations that have got involved. Are they sort of more local outfits, or have you got a lot of multinational type companies signed up? Just how does that break down? I'd be interested to know, because I assume that has quite a lot of control over how much action we might be able to achieve over the next few years.
Well, let me be fair, James. It has been a very short period of time. Okay, the Race to Zero started as a campaign in June 5th, 2020. Okay, so we're talking about a little more than 1 year. Truth to be said, the first companies committed to this campaign joining the Climate Ambition Alliance in September 2019. I don't want to mess with the other acronyms and terms, but this agenda started very strongly at the Secretary General Climate Summit in September 2019, when we had at that time, I think it was like 75 businesses, mostly big businesses. Of course, my two SMEs were part of that, but let's set that apart. It was mostly big multinationals that were driving this ambition, and most of them had already been working on the climate agenda for long. Then what we did with Nigel is a very concrete invitation for different types of business to join. And the first effort we did was at COP25, where we invited certified B Corps to also set a very concrete leadership signal, because the certified B Corps internally, and I'm one of the co-founders of the movement, we decided that when it comes to being a leader in the business sector, and in this case, should mean anticipating your commitments. So the B Corps are committed to 2030. So what we did in Madrid at COP25, we gathered about, at that time, a little bit more than 500 B Corps with a commitment of 2030, and some other 300 businesses, mostly big multinationals, committed to 2050. Later on, what we did, we say, okay, we have like mostly these two types of businesses. One probably much more related to innovative businesses, and the big multinationals. We need to keep on pushing with them, and both groups have grown substantively in this year. But we also launched what we call the SME Climate Hub. On one side, to allow a very clear entry point towards a commitment for 2050 for many, hopefully millions of SMEs that we need them to be part of this opportunity, I would say. But also because when a big multinational commits to this agenda, they are not only doing it through what is called the scope 1 and 2. It's not only about their internal emissions. They're also doing it incorporating the scope 3. And that means that those multinationals are already starting to talk to their value chain, saying, guys, we need you to provide us products and services that also come with this commitment. That represents a fantastic opportunity. On one side, to expand the commitments, but on the other side, it's a fantastic opportunity for those SMEs or those providers or multinationals to start moving in a way that their profitability and their growth comes with this value inside, right? So through the SME Climate Hub, we're also pushing a lot of multinational. Having said that, what happens in countries like New Zealand, probably you have several B Corps, and then you have the big multinationals operating there. Right? You have the Unilever, and you have Microsoft, and you have whatever, Nestle and Nike and Adidas. Those companies that might not be New Zealanders in the origin, they are already operating there. They have a commitment, a global commitment. So they should start talking to the New Zealand companies, saying this is a trajectory, this is a challenge in which we are together. And if you, provider, are not capable of signing a commitment like this one, then I'm going to have to find someone else to provide me. That narrative is working. That narrative is also moving the economies. But on the other side, another thing that is happening is that through the financial institutions, we're seeing, for example, pension funds from the global north. Most of the when it comes to the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, most of them are pension funds from the global north. But those pension funds in the global north, some of them own assets, for example, utilities in the global south. And we have already been listening to them, talking to their portfolio in the global south. Those companies, as I say, mostly utilities, are starting to move with their own commitments and at the same time talking to their providers. So a commitment that is being made in the global north by a group of owners of certain assets, can be a pension fund, has a capacity of mobilize thousands of SMEs in the global south. Then there are certain agendas that are let's say, the low-hanging fruits, the energy sector. There's no reason why all of those renewable energy companies from New Zealand, why are they not part of Race to Zero? If they don't join, they are affecting their own self-interest. They should be the ones promoting that every company have a commitment like this one, started by them, right? Because that creates, again, an ecosystem where everybody is talking about the same goals, and therefore they are strengthening the type of economy that provides them the best business opportunities. So we're seeing all of that, and it might happen that we're talking about something that has happened in a very short period of time. Well, the moment is now. Join the Race to Zero today. Don't miss any single second and start walking the path. It's about what we call the 4 Ps. Pledge, the simplest possible way, go for the global compact, and pledge for the business ambition for 1.5 degrees. That would be like the easiest way. And if someone can write it in the chat, would be fantastic. Business ambition for 1.5 from the UN Global Compact. Then the second P is plan. You have to pledge setting a plan that must be validated by science, and you will have between 12 and 24 months for that to be validated by science-based targets. Third P, proceed. You have to start now. Let's move. We don't have time to lose. And the fourth P is publish, because transparency, at least once per year, is absolutely critical for this agenda.
Well, thanks very much, Gonzalo. I'll hand over to Nicola. No doubt you have some questions.
Just picking up on that, Gonzalo, I can see that, you know, the commitment side can certainly be contagious. There's a lot of enthusiasm. There's a lot of conversation going on there. The bit that I find interesting, in particular from a business perspective, is capturing what the solutions are, because you've said in your talk, and we certainly, the Commission backs this, is that offsetting is not the solution. And so what are some of the solutions that you have seen have been the easy wins, you know, the fastest ways to actually get results? And the second question tied to that is, what legislation particularly assists, you know, what helps and what hinders? Because sometimes government can get in the way, and other times they can be very helpful from a business point of view.
Sure. Thank you, Nicola. Yes, and totally agree with you. Like, commitments, fantastic. We celebrate. At the end, most of the challenges that, I mean, in life, right, start with a vision or in this case a pledge, a commitment, and it's great, but then it must be immediately followed by action. If not, it will definitely be self-destroyed, right? So we have a clear understanding that both elements are extremely important. We have to set a vision, we have to commit, but then we have to start setting a plan for, as I said, at least this decisive decade. In that sense, what we have done is that we have worked with our team developing a system transformation map for the major sectors of the economy, and now we have at least 30 of them well mapped, and those 30 sectors are expressed in what I mentioned, the 2030 breakthroughs, and those 2030 race to zero breakthroughs, because it's related to, in this case, the race to zero. We haven't spoken about the race to resilience, but when it comes to the mitigation part, we already have mapped what is happening in each of those sectors, how what it's called the SCurve looks like. When you see in certain, let's call harder to evade sector, that the situation is difficult, it's moving very low, like the shipping sector, but then all of a sudden Maersk buys these 8 new vessels that will be fueled with methanol. That creates a new momentum for the shipping industry, and all of a sudden the industry starts moving in a linear way until what we have determined, until 20% of that sector of the economy incorporates the same type of commitment and technology, and then the curve moves to an exponential phase. In that aspect, we have seen certain sectors like the IT sector or the green power, or I mean some others. For example, we're honestly very surprised of what we have seen in the last month with the cement industry, cement and concrete, that very few, maybe months ago, but at least a few years ago was a laggard, was definitely a sector that was one of the hard to evade, became now a possible to evade sector, and has been shifting the trajectory and becoming exponential. So we're mapping all of those sectors to also show everyone, and all of that information is, of course, is part of our role as a United Nations team. So it's all public, everything is available for everyone to check. In my industry, what is happening? What can we, how can we be part of the solution? But in general terms, never compensating and offsetting can be a plan. That must not be the plan. You can, of course, at the end, if you have eliminated all unnecessary sources of emissions, if you have reduced everything that you can, all of your emissions, and at the end, you might have some residual emissions, of course, you can compensate that, hopefully all the time, through nature-based solutions that can have a credible standard. If you can start that path and contribute to the needed capacity of sequestering carbon from the day one, that I think that's fantastic, but never consider that as your plan. Happy for you to start compensating, offsetting, but as I said, the plan must be reducing your emissions in this decade up to 50%, and then continue your trajectory to net zero, while only considering the idea of compensating the residual part. When it comes to the state members, well, our mandate is, as I said initially, it's a parallel one, or not a parallel, sorry, it's one that is complementary, right? We are here to serve the parties as the champions, and all of our team is providing information, solutions, evidence for them to feel much more support, and therefore we notice when things are well accepted by certain parties, and in some other cases they don't. It's not up to us to criticize if they're doing it well or not. We don't merge into their particular interest or national interest. Of course, there are certain, we expect that every nation in the world can have this trajectory towards net zero committed by legislation. That would be the dream, that legislation is also aligned with the NDCs. So we need to see that all of these so urgent matters are part of every other area of a government that is incorporated, that they have a budget, that they have action, and that is absolutely aligned on one side with the national determined contribution and how the country enhance that NDC, but also hopefully also with a legislation that will help all of the other sectors of the economy, being subnational governments or investors or businesses, to feel confident that yes, this is something that is strong enough for me to continue being part of this agenda.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. We have a number of questions coming in from the audience, and great to see a fairly large number of people online. One of the first ones, and one that's close to my thinking, you know, I'm involved in analysing the physical climate and so on, and something that's come up in recent days. The question is, how would you respond when somebody makes a statement that any changes that we make to reduce emissions from business, from human activity, are more than cancelled out by natural events such as the massive wildfires that have released so
Sorry,
much
I didn't
carbon
get, I lost you just 1 second when you're describing what happens when I said that all of these efforts and then I lost you.
Okay, the question is, and how would you respond to this question if somebody says any changes we make to emissions from human activity are more than cancelled out by natural processes such as the big increase in wildfires in, for instance, the west of North America, which releases so much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So, you know, if natural feedbacks are ending up putting more greenhouse gas into the air than we're able to reduce from reducing aspects of human activity, how would you respond to that? What should we do?
First, I do recognize that there's a lot that we still don't know, and there are many feedback processes that, of course, it's not up to me to understand how they will evolve. But definitely, I think it's up to me and up to every reasonable human to rely on science. I think that that's one of the most important learnings from COVID. And it might not be perfect, but this is definitely not only the best expression of science that we have. In very few aspects of humanity, we had such a level of solid base information that puts us on a particular trajectory. So, I mean, if somebody feels that it's more capable than thousands of scientists that have been checking all of the available information, well, that's not me. And when I go to the doctor, they have 4,000 doctors telling me that I have skin cancer. Honestly, I will believe them, and I will take the medicine that they ask me to take. They might be wrong. Maybe they didn't take into consideration certain aspects that were whatever. They can fail as well, sure, but the possibility for them to fail is quite small, I believe, in consideration of how much knowledge is there. But on the other side, I believe that we have no other option than acting according to not only the instructions that science is giving us or the vision that science is giving us, but also in terms of what do we have in terms of tools. The cost of inaction is unacceptable. And at the end, I think that we have the moral duty to really do as much as we can. We can fail, sure. There is a possibility of failure. I'm going to go for that percentage of possibility of winning this battle until the last minute, no doubt about it. And what I'm going to do is follow science and what science tells me. And in that sense, the scientific knowledge is the one that is packed at the IPCC. Maybe there is some other knowledge out there that is not being considered, not up to me to determine whether that's reasonable or not. I think that we have enough solid base, scientific solid base, when it comes to the IPCC. Then when it comes to Race to Zero and Race to Resilience, we have set 2 expert peer review groups, one for each campaign, and those expert peer review group, one based or led by the University of Oxford, the other one based and led by the University of Chile, is putting together scientists from all around the world to keep on checking if what we're doing is the right thing, and therefore if there's something that we need to correct or we need to filter. We have just opened, and we're ready to close it in 9 days, an open consultation process for everyone to let us know if there's something that we're doing that needs to be corrected or that can be done in a better way. We are keen to do so. In this moment, honestly, I think this is definitely the best plan that we have, and we're absolutely open to keep on strengthening and improving it all the time based on science and delivering on the promise of Paris and receiving the support of the IPCC.
Gonzalo, just I guess getting back to a sort of the business connection here, I'm always fascinated with what you do in Chile. It's a great country to visit, and you're always very innovative. And I'm just wondering, what are the lessons do you think New Zealand can draw from your country's transition to a circular economy? Are there things there that we can actually learn from you and see how we can apply those?
Oh, it would be beautiful if we can do an exchange. So we learn from your constitution and the way you set the basis of the society, and you go and learn from what we have done in terms of circular economy. Would be fantastic. First lesson, take the name of the agency in the Ministry of Environment, if it exists, change it from Agency of Waste to Agency of Circular Economy. It might sound weird that it's like just changing a name. That narrative changes everything, because we have to live in an environment where waste is not an acceptable thing, right? We in Triciclos, the company that I co-founded 13 years ago, we say that waste is nothing but an error of design. And it's about how do we design the products, how do we design our interaction with nature, how do we design the business model, how do we design the way we consume or we use, how do we design the way we dispose, but also how do we design our public policies. In that sense, there are so many errors. We have set our current society with based on moments in which we had other types of imperatives that were probably very important. I say that most, I mean, it's not me, like if you read the Anthropocene, you can see like the hockey stick started like in the 1950s when everything started to accelerate. And in that moment, probably as a global society, we were living in the idea of building the world post-war. Those imperatives are no longer the imperatives in which we live today. That part of the blind spots of those years were about how we accepted disposability, or how we accepted the idea of programmed obsolescence, how we accepted the idea of linearity and things to be wasted. Many times we talk about the single-use plastic, right? The single-use plastic being something that we need to combat. Tell me about the zero-use plastic. How many times something goes in front of you, right? Might be in a tray that you receive in a restaurant or in a plane or in a train, that comes with a lot of packaging and elements packed that many times you don't even want it. Well, sometimes that product was produced thousands of kilometers away, packed, shipped, then distributed, went to a warehouse, was there, then it went to another distribution, then again brought to you and went directly to the waste. I mean, that's one of the best symbols of our stupidity. So we need to combat that. There are a lot of, and of course that's about not only wasting material and polluting our environment. It's about wasting money, as if we were like in the best moment on history. So there are certain elements, of course. There are certain elements of legislation and connection with the citizens around plastic bags, single-use products, styrofoam, that are, I would say, low-hanging fruits that allow, those are like, we call them like the entry points. That allows you to start talking about the topic. Let's talk about plastic bags. Let's talk about styrofoam. Let's talk about single-use plastics and zero-use plastics. Then let's talk about organics. In our countries, between 40 and 60% of what we dispose as households is organic. Organic that, if dumped mostly in an improper way, will decompose and generate methane and then increase the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, while on the other side can provide a lot of solutions even for, we're working here in Chile with some project with soldier fly to transform those organic products into, on one side, fertilizers, but on the other side, a meal that can replace fish meal, that can replace soy meal. So we can do so many virtuous things and create an economy that growth and give better quality of life for ourselves and for so many other species that live with us in this beautiful planet, while just thinking and analyzing what is in our black bag. How can we tackle now the pollution that has been increased because of COVID, the medical stuff, right? That has been super important, but we need to place innovation there. What can we do with electronics? How can we combat the program obsolescence? How can we really combat the problem of pollution coming from the textile industry? And most of those elements are not only problems that you need to tackle once the waste is already produced. Most of them are related to, what do we buy? Do we need all of those stuff? Can we go and start really operating in an economy where we as human beings, as citizens, we are not consumers in every time? Right? I am a consumer if I eat a sandwich or a lettuce or whatever. I am not a consumer if I go to a store and buy a cell phone. I'm not going to consume it. If I eat it, I'm dying. I'm a user of this phone. If I'm a user of this phone, I might be willing to own it or not. I can be just a user of it, right? So that creates also many opportunities that can maintain the growth of the economy and create jobs and opportunities, but at the same time will reduce the impact and the stress that we're creating in our environment, both on the extraction side and on the disposal side. And I can keep on talking. I can keep on talking like a couple of hours about that, but we don't have enough time.
Yeah. Can I just add one to that? So obviously, that has kicked off. There is an awful lot happening in Chile. And there are people like yourself with lots of enthusiasm and vision to make this happen. But was there a particular trigger or something that happened either from government or particular industries that actually sort of kick-started this? Was it a stick or a carrot?
I mean, probably the first problem is always related to not having the place where to build a new landfill. So most of the time this is related to having a constraint, right? Oops, we cannot open a new landfill. We have to start doing new things, right? So then it comes to innovation, and there has been quite a strong wave of innovators in Chile that are now also expanding to other countries. Myself or the companies that I started being one of them. Well, probably part of that is connected to a certain level of good infrastructure for innovation and for startups in Chile. Startup Chile and Corfo and some other B Corp movement and even some NGOs have played a very important role on providing the conditions for having some room for startups and then do the connections. In a country like Chile that is quite small, you can do connections quite easily. And then even the multinationals with their change in terms of opening to all of these ideas, you have like, when it comes to plastic and packaging, you have almost all of the big multinationals with commitments of making all of their plastic packaging recyclable, compostable, or usable from now to 2025. So, I mean, they have a huge interest on innovating and trial. Then Chile had this particularity being a small economy with quite strong let's say, governance or political structure, I would say that probably most companies will use Chile as a very good place to pilot, and then those initiatives that work then might be capable of scaling to other regions. Probably most of the big innovations were related to consumer goods and retail, more than there have been some related to mining, that is the biggest sector of the economy, some of them related to forestry, very few of them still in the agribusiness and aquaculture, but we are expecting that now it comes the moment for them. It's come, and this is a big message, like even net zero is just an interim target towards regeneration. We need to learn how to regenerate the ecosystemical service that we have lost and that we have deployed. So this is the moment when all of our agribusiness, our food sector has a great opportunity for transforming themselves and becoming a big solution. We as a group and working with our main campaign, Regen 10, we think that there's a capacity of the agri sector to sequester 50 gigatons of CO2 from now to 2030. So honestly, we believe that there's a great moment for a sector like that has been quite slow, quite conservative in many ways, to really step forward and somehow take the position that we have lost for quite a while. And me being a farmer, we're doing that with the winery and really position that as part of the value proposition. We are selling a wine that comes with dry farming, comes with 100% renewable energy, comes with a B Corp certification, comes with the work with the biodiversity of the region, comes with several elements that are probably adding more value to the brand, besides generating this fantastic impact.
Very fantastic product too. Yeah, James.
Yes, and thanks again, Gonzalo. There's lots of questions coming and we're almost out of time. I think I might be able to just squeeze in one more, though, and something again that I'm really interested to hear about. So what's your view of how the race to zero will be used at COP26 in Glasgow? You know, will it mobilise higher levels of political support? How will that parallel discussion between the business sector and the political sector play out, do you think, at the COP meeting?
Well, at COP26, Race to Zero is already playing a really important role when it comes to both presidencies and both high-level champions. We are mostly inviting speakers of non-state actors that are part of the race. So it's a prerequisite. So we want mostly to hear voices that have already committed and we want to hear from them. What are they doing? How are they going to deliver in this decade? We are doing a very strong effort not to allow greenwash or bullshitting there. We need to see exactly what is happening and what can we accelerate. If we do that right, we will show to the world that net zero by 2050 became a standard, a golden standard when it comes to climate commitments all around the world. And we already have checked the list, and honestly, we have quite a good standard when it comes to having good representation. On one side, gender balance, 50-50, or more women than male, then representativity of all the globe, and even like the less heard voices. So the idea is that the world can hear this very diverse community of non-state actors, 100% committed to this race, to win it, to accelerate, to achieve the goal, not only on time, but hopefully we can anticipate that a lot. But also we expect to see some FOMO, some fear of missing out. We want to piss off those that are not there yet, those that are doubting, those that are feeling uncomfortable of taking a commitment with such an urgent topic. And if we do that, we will provide the nations some sort of base for them to feel confident in order to increase their ambition individually by enhancing their indices, collectively to feel that, yeah, we have no more time. We have to take very determined decisions, and it's an agenda that is now so embedded into the need of solidarity around the globe, due to the situation that we're living all around the world, not only about the climate crisis, but the COVID as well. That we expect that through this campaign we can bring part of that solidarity. We can reinforce, hopefully, the solidarity elements that the nations can bring, but mostly to send not only the sense of hope to the citizens of the world, but give them something to grab, right? To say, okay, this is something where I can participate, that I can belong, I can interact there, and therefore my individual efforts that are super fundamental can then help others and these institutions to move faster and forward.
Wow, that sounds great. Again, sounds inspiring. And I'm not sure, Charlie, whether we're out of time or.
Yeah, sorry, no, it's not USACH, it's Universidad de Chile, the CR2, the Center for Resilience at the Universidad de Chile. That's the one that has the expert peer review group for Race to Resilience. So Maisa Rojas and Paulina Aldunce and Andrea Rudnick. And Tom Hale at the University of Oxford, he's leading the expert peer review group of Race to Zero. I don't know if there's any other one.
It would have been lovely to have been able to heard a bit more about the Race to Resilience too, but I think we are out of time. But Charlie, what more time do we have?
I think we could probably squeeze one more in. We've got three or 4 minutes, so let's just try for one more, and then we can wrap up quickly.
Gonzalo, would you like to share with us just how the Race to Resilience has emerged and what that is aiming to do?
Sure. So again, remember that our role is to mobilize non-state actors, and then we try to position the role of the non-state actors, balancing an agenda that most of the time, when it comes to the non-state actors, when it comes to the business sector, is very, very unbalanced towards mitigation, right? We most of the time talk about mitigation and we get very well related to it, but the agenda is both about mitigation and also resilience. And therefore, we first send a very concrete message that these two topics, these two campaigns must go hand by hand. Those are sisters campaigns, not one bigger than the other, one more relevant than the other. It sometimes depends very much on which region or which city or which company. We're seeing a massive need on positioning a way for the private sector to contribute to the resilient agenda. As I don't know if I told it here or in the previous talk, but with Nigel, we were visiting some small island states, mostly to find ways for bringing the non-state actors and the financial institutions toward developing the business models that can, for them to contribute to increasing the resilience. Again, one other lesson from COVID, like we know that we have to build resilience on a local base in so many ways, when it comes to not only infrastructure, when it comes to our food production, when it comes to our independence of energy production, when it comes to our water sources. So in so many ways, what we have learned from the climate shocks, but also from COVID, is the importance of having local communities, regional capacity, with a governance, with a way of working and living that can be set based on its resilience. The Race to Resilience, therefore, it's about putting people in the center. We have developed this massive campaign to increase the resilience of 4 billion people from now to 2030, mostly in 3 areas: coastal communities, both from oceans and rivers. So how do we increase the resilience of those communities? Second, urban areas, mostly about housing, and how do we eliminate slums and increase the capacity of people living in any urban area of the world to live in a house that can provide them well-being. But also the third topic is rural area, mostly increasing the resilience of small small farmers from different parts of the world that are not needing technology, needing knowledge, needing financing mechanisms to increase their capacity, sometimes to improve their yields, to live according to their culture, but mostly not to be displaced because of the climate crisis. And hopefully in those 3 communities, we can see these different initiatives being deployed, and many of them have been working there for years and years. The idea is that we can pack the capacity of increasing the well-being of those people that they can thrive despite of the climate crisis.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. It's been a huge privilege to hear from you and learn more about your experience. And thank you to Nicola and James for taking us through this session today. We've had so many fantastic questions, and I'm really sorry we couldn't get through them all, but thank you to everyone who's participated. It's been great to have you join us. So please enjoy the rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are. And I'm going to hand over to Bevan now to close the session for us with a karakia.
E te atua, manakitia mai mātou I hoki nei, ki o mātou kāinga, kia whakapapa paunamu te moana, kia tere te karohirohi I mua I tō huarahi. Bless us as we return to our homes. May peace be widespread. May the sea glisten like greenstone, and may the shimmer of light guide you on your way. He mihi rangatira kia koe Gonzalo. So that's acknowledgements to you, Gonzalo. The acknowledgements fit for a chief. That's fantastic work you're doing in leadership and entrepreneurial spirit. Thank you very much. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
So much, yeah.